I think I started using ChatGPT maybe like a month or two after it came out. And I'm also I use it every single day now, like 10 plus time a day. And for those of you listening that haven't used it, I mean, I almost want to cut you off of the podcast. Like, you should be using, doesn't matter which one, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever, like, please start using this.
And Mark, if I could like double down on that comment, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I do this. I have these talks because like people shouldn't be afraid of this. Like this is something that people need to just jump into. These are tools for you to use that can improve your professional life, can improve your personal life. Like, there are so many use cases. I'm going on vacation in a few days, travel planning, all that kind of stuff. There's so much that you can do with these tools. And again, most of like the basic versions that are pretty good are all free.
Yeah.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Hi there, everybody. This is Mark Verbenkov, and welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. This is episode number 157, and I'm coming to you today from El Zonte. This is the Bitcoin beach of El Salvador, which was actually the first circular economy set up in the country where you can use Bitcoin at most local stores and effectively live without touching any fiat currency. So it's pretty interesting to be here to talk to some of the locals and a number of the gringos that have set up shop here. It's definitely an interesting project. And if you are curious about emerging technologies in general, which is probably why you're listening to the podcast, and of course any ideas surrounding self-sovereignty, I would definitely recommend coming to this small surf town to see how things work here. You can also just get in touch with me, and I'm happy to give you any kind of advice or accommodation, recommendations, etc. So yeah, just shoot me a message. Happy to explain kind of what I've seen here. I'm also going to probably come up with a future episode focused on this. But today's episode is not about Bitcoin or blockchain technologies. It is once again about artificial intelligence and its far-ranging impact on our world, which I keep finding to be more and more interesting every time that I talk about it or have another guest onto the podcast to share their insights about it, which, as I discussed last night at one of these local meetups that is put on here, I think it's arguably going to be much more significant than blockchain's technology's impact over time. So with that in mind, in our conversation today, Mike, my guest, and I discuss our mutual fascination of artificial intelligence, and I think really try to cover a broad range of impacts in industries and parts of our society today that will be changed by the potential of artificial intelligence, and of course, looking more specifically at generative AI. So we discuss the democratization of technology in general and its potential impact on various professions. We really try to highlight how AI and specifically chatbots could provide incredible opportunities for entrepreneurs and individuals to brainstorm more effectively, build and create their various products and tools in the future. We also explore the potential of using AI to create personalized media, such as customized family documentaries or animated recreations of old photos. Additionally, we touch on the potential benefits and drawbacks of artificial intelligence, its impact on different fields, its potential to improve the medical outcomes in the healthcare industry, and much, much more. It's a really interesting discussion. We touch on a number of maybe broader impacts of artificial intelligence, which I think is an interesting kind of refresher from going down one specific rabbit hole or focusing on one specific industry, and kind of diving deeper into one industry's impacts. So my guest today is Mike Todasco. He is a seasoned expert in AI-driven creativity, spending his days exploring how tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney are revolutionizing the creative process. So with a diverse background at PayPal, where he actually played key roles in product innovation, management, and marketing, Mike has also founded a startup, Sketchmaven, and has been granted over 80 US utility patents. He began his career in finance and accounting at GE, holds an MBA, a Bachelor of Science from Illinois, and occasionally teaches leadership. I personally had a great time talking to Mike. It's a much more relaxed, conversational type of interview today. So for any of you that are interested, of course, as we touch on the podcast a lot about generative AI, this is another terrific conversation, and I hope that you get something out of it. Hi there, Mike. Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast today to talk about, clearly one of my favorite topics, because so many podcasts on my little channel here focus on it, artificial intelligence, and I guess we'll touch on the future of AI later on in the episode. But yeah, great to have you on here, and hopefully looking forward to an interesting conversation about all this.
No, love being here, Mark. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I hope that we go down some really interesting directions in this discussion.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, my favorite question to ask right at the outset is, what made you get interested in artificial intelligence, and especially, I guess, with the current hype wave? Was it before the hype wave? Was it generative AI? Was it ChatGPT? Was there something that made you especially interested in this fascinating and very fast-paced world that we're living in?
Yeah, I love it, and I'd almost break it into two parts as part of the answer that I'm going to give you. So, my former job was running the innovation group at PayPal, and by nature, I'm not an engineer. I am not a technologist. So I started my career in finance of all things. So I was an accountant way back in the day. But one of the great things I had, running this innovation team, was we would have a lot of demos from inside the company, outside the company, of machine learning engineers, or AI engineers, as we would commonly call them now. And they would show these amazing demos all the time. And I would get to see these. And I just remember I would be constantly awestruck by them. And then I would always be a little bit disappointed. I'm like, oh God, I can't do that. I don't know how to code. I couldn't do what they're doing there. They got these amazing tools. They're getting paid, $500,000 a year to do this magical stuff. I can't do that. And then, fast forward a few years, and I still vividly remember the first time I interacted with GPT-3. This would have been in 2022. I was actually, in 2021. I was writing a piece. I went back to school to get an MFA in writing. So I was writing a piece, and I wanted a discussion between kind of a little bit of a computer and a person. And I wanted to build that out. And so I wrote one part, and I'm like, well, let's get this tool to write the other part of it. And I just remembered doing that. And the output that I was getting from GPT-3 was amazing. I was sitting at my kitchen table, and I was just looking at words just stream across the screen. And it kind of sometimes it made sense, sometimes it didn't. But for what I was writing, it almost didn't even matter. When it didn't make sense, I'm like, oh my God, this is a genius. And I literally remember I took my computer, I ran upstairs, screaming, telling my wife, I'm like, there are words appearing. I did not write these words. I did not create these words. It was amazing. It was magical. And, and for me, to bring that back to the first story, one of the reasons why I think it was so magical is because I wasn't an engineer. I didn't know how to do this. And this was the first time as what became known as generative AI, in this place where you just talk to it in English and you can get an output that is, as creative as you can possibly want it to be. You don't need to know any coding, and you have access to the most powerful models in the world. And you get all that stuff for $20 a month now.
Yeah.
And that's why I spend my days playing with this, talking to folks. This is world changing, and we're just at the beginning of it.
Yeah. Very, very similar to my journey down this path of generative AI as well. Great to hear. Maybe a quick question here. So, you've been using it for quite some time, used it before the public release. Have you experienced a substantial change in the type of responses that you're getting from it? Obviously, you're also getting better at prompting, right, which I think is an important thing for all of us to understand. And maybe not focusing on the bells and whistles of the multimodal aspects, taking pictures and chatting to it. Just the straight responses that you're getting from it. Are you finding significant differences? I could ask more, but let's just keep it there.
Absolutely. No, it's a really great question. So beginning late 2022, one of the things I decided to do was I'm going to have these tools write a book for me every month. And I then published those books on Amazon. This is before, this is right around the time that ChatGPT came out. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to use a different model, different tool. And I'm going to be very transparent. So it's under the pen name of Alex Irons. And I think one of the AIs gave me that name of Alex Irons, which I decided to use. And all the money goes to charity. I will say I actually don't make anything off of this. I don't feel right doing that. But like in the very beginning, it was pretty hard. It was pretty hard. And honestly, the stories were pretty awful coming out of there. And I honestly, I try not to edit them. But sometimes I just had to truncate these things because they were just atrocious. But like I can see just like doing the same thing month over month, and I've done it with Bard and Gemini, and every model that's out there and every new version I try and do this with. You definitely see increasing over time. It's getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better each and every time you're doing it. I would say right now for just writing something that is fiction, we're maybe at the level of like a pretty good high school English student, maybe like a junior, senior, something like that. Nothing that you're going to actually pay real money on Amazon to read. But when I started this, I think we were probably, maybe a good 7th or 8th grader writing these things. And again, I'm kind of arbitrarily choosing these years, but maybe in the last 2 years or so, we've seen 4 or 5 grade levels improvements in that. And it's continuing. And the favorite model I have as of today is Claude 3.5 Sonnet.
Okay.
And it really does craft prose quite well. I mean, I do. If I had to write a difficult email last night, and I just kind of threw my thoughts in there, and I just said, "Hey, can you do this and use this tone for me? Like, here's the bullet points. Here's what it is." And what it gave me was probably 85% of what I used.
Yeah.
And a year and a half ago, it probably would have been 45%. It would have been a little less than half. So the models are absolutely getting better. Just purely for writing.
Yeah. Well, that's my experience as well. I think I started using ChatGPT maybe like a month or 2 after it came out, and I'm also I use it every single day now, like 10 plus times a day. And for those of you listening that haven't used it, I mean, I almost want to cut you off of the podcast. Like, you should be using, doesn't matter which one, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever, like, please start using this.
And Mark, if I could double down on that comment, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I do this. I have these talks because like people shouldn't be afraid of this. Like this is something that people need to just jump into. These are tools for you to use that can improve your professional life, can improve your personal life. I couldn't even imagine Googling a recipe anymore. Like, I use ChatGPT for every possible recipe because I'm a horrible cook and I screw up steps all the time. And if I forget step 3 and all of a sudden I'm on step 7, I'm like, dude, I just forgot step 3. ChatGPT, tell me what I should do now. And it will tell you and all that kind of stuff. Like, there are so many use cases. I'm going on vacation in a few days, travel planning, all that kind of stuff. There's so much that you can do with these tools. And again, most of like the basic versions that are pretty good are all free.
Yeah. I think that's something that people often forget is even the free versions are better than what the paid version was like a year ago, something like that. And it's only going to get better. And I think I've even heard that it's cheaper to just throw out the older models as the newer models keep getting improved, because the newer models or the second tier new models just outperform everything, and it's so cheap it's worth just keeping it for free.
Absolutely.
So we'll see what happens over the next couple of years, especially when GPT-5 comes out. I think everybody's very excited for that. One of the things that I keep telling people, part of my job, I started a business about a year ago, and I give presentations every now and then on starting to use ChatGPT as one of the things that I do. I keep telling everybody, it's not just helping you with emails, but it's also good at like brainstorming strategies or new ideas. I know that that's something that you talk about a little bit. Could you give your perspective on this? Like, how is it used, or how have you used it? How do you think people should be using it as kind of this partner in brainstorming, whether it's personal or professional uses?
The thing about brainstorming and innovation, ideation is it's really about quantity versus quality. Or I should say quantity will yield quality. And there's a very famous study that was done at the University of Florida where they had two groups of people. One were told to take as many photographs as possible. The other group was told to take the best photographs possible. And then at the end, the judges kind of blindly just said, okay, which group actually has the best photographs? And of course, the group that actually had the best photographs were not the ones who were told to do the best ones. They were the ones who were told to do the most. And again and again and again, in the world of creativity and innovation, you see that. And this is something that the models do extremely well. If you say, hey, I'm writing a book and it's about X, I don't know what to use to make the title of this book. Within 5 seconds, any of these tools can rattle off 20 titles for you. And you know what? They're not all going to be perfect. And there's probably a little bit like, oh, I could use this part and this part. And like, okay, I like, 1, 7, and 9. Give me more like that. And have it do it again and again and again. Like for iteration, it moves faster than any human possibly could. And you effectively then take on the role of the director in this. So, whatever it is, like, again, you're thinking of a title for something or whatever creative or thinking about what are some different ways I could work my way through this business problem that I have. The more context that you give it, and then just the more you just keep asking it different types of questions, it is going to give so many responses so fast. And then your role then changes to just say, okay, help me. I'm going to now sort of weigh these things. I'm going to look at them and see which ones are really valuable or not. And a lot of it, you talked about prompting, or a lot of it just comes down to asking the right question. I remember back in the day when I was a product manager, one of the things I loved to do with the engineers and design teams that I had was like just ask weird questions. And so one example I always love to tell, I was doing consumer onboarding for PayPal. So literally you want to sign up for a PayPal account. This is how you log in. And in our world, it was always about, well, less fields, make it simple, blah, blah, blah. You want people to sign up as fast as possible. And so we did a brainstorming session one time. And the question was, how do you make onboarding so much fun that the person actually doesn't even want to use their product? All they want to do is sign up for your product again. Again, a kind of ridiculous question to ask. But just by asking a question in a different way, it starts to get you like, well, okay, what matters? And you start to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that world. And then you start to say like, does it really matter to have less fields? Or do you just want people to finish? Or do you want to inform them? Or what are these other things that are important? And these are things you can do amazingly with the AIs. And frankly, you can even have the AI help you with the right question to ask or different types of questions to ask. I think a lot of people become frozen working with large language models because there are infinite possibilities to what you can do. And with infinite possibilities, we're not used to that in software. We're not used to that in the world. We tend to shut down and we actually react less to that versus if we're kind of given one or two paths to go down. It's hard for people to manage, but once you get comfortable with that, these things can be amazing for brainstorming creativity.
Yeah. I think it's called the paradox of choice, right? If you have only one or two options, it's a much easier, faster decision. If you've got so many, you're gonna maybe not even buy the product or use the tool.
You give somebody 3 different types of jelly or 30 different types of jelly, they will buy more if there's only 3 different types of jelly. Original experiment.
I think I want to re-emphasize this idea of it's a starting tool, right? Like it really helps you if you have got we were talking about creativity, writer's block. You need to strategize something. I'm trying to build a product right now, and what do I call this thing? And, how do I do the branding for this? Just type it into ChatGPT, and what would take, maybe a couple hours or a couple days of thinking over, like it can be done in 5 to 10 minutes, or at least have an initial idea that you can carry forward. And
can I comment on writer's blocks?
Sure.
Because I do write a lot about AI and nonfiction stuff. One of the things I do whenever I'm writing, I will often leave like little brackets. It's just like the thing that I did. Like whenever I get stuck on something, I just kind of bracket it, or I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound right. I'm just gonna put in brackets, but I'm just gonna move on. Because you get really stuck on something. I've done this. I do this all the time now. And maybe I write something that's 1,200 words, and all of a sudden I look back and there's 3 or 4 brackets. I literally then just throw it into Claude or ChatGPT and say, hey, you see the brackets in there? Give me some options for what I could put in there, or help me like round that out using the voice that I have in the rest of it. And it will get me 80% of the way there. And that's a super simple thing that you can do. Would I have probably gotten to that answer? Possibly. But again, it's really just having a writing partner.
Yeah.
Like it's a really talented intern that you have by your side at your beck and call at any time.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to, this brainstorming session, and I'm assuming you had many of these over at PayPal. Not to focus too much on PayPal. I know we've got lots of other things to talk about, but could you put yourself back in the shoes of I think senior innovation director, right? Was the job title?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So in these brainstorming sessions, it was just humans.
Yes.
How would you think that the brainstorming sessions would happen nowadays if you had tools like ChatGPT, Gemini? Like, obviously it would be faster. Do you think that the final product or final ideas would be better? Like, just maybe walk us through what your thoughts are on that, because I think that is also really interesting.
Like the short answer, Mark, is
yes. Yeah.
Like what that exactly looks like, I don't know. So when I was doing that, we would hold this one session, and it was a weekly thing. It was like 2 hours long in PayPal, and anybody in the company could join. It was called Ted and Breakfast. So 8:00 on Thursday mornings, I would like bring in breakfast. I would literally go to like the local McDonald's, get a bunch of Egg McMuffins and things like that, throw them on a table. People could just kind of come in, grab a bite, and we would just have TED Talks rolling in the background. And almost every time, like nobody would say much for the first 10, 20, 30 minutes. And then all of a sudden, like you'd see something on a TED Talk, it would inspire this, and then that would lead to that. And that, within a little bit of time, like we weren't even paying attention to the TED Talks. It was just running on a loop that we had there. And we were just at the whiteboard talking about whatever we were inspired by as part of that. Having these tools could get you into that so much faster. It could get you into that flow state. It could, keep on pushing the bounds of what you have. Like, it can get really tiring doing these brainstorms too, because you are really working your brain. I mean, sure. I am sure if you kind of like were to, was it the breath thing where you can measure calorie output or something like that? Like when your brain is really processing these sessions, it can be somewhat exhausting doing it. But to have, an AI in the room that's maybe, I don't know if it's like Otter or Fireflies or something that's constantly listening, and, you hook it up to a Bluetooth thing where there's a magic button, and whenever you hit that button, it'll like propose a new question or a new direction, or it'll look back and try and connect things. That would be, there's something that was said 15 minutes in with something that was said 15 minutes in. Well, if you combine those things, what would that look like? There's a bunch of different directions that you could give the AI that is just going to make it so lively, because its memory is, it's infinite. What the effect, yes, there are token windows and things like that, or limits that you have with these models, but for all practical purposes for this, it could be as long as you want it to be or as you need it to be. And then you could just keep on bringing that into the session. So, the tools that exist today, you can do pretty much everything that I described. So, like if somebody was having a brainstorm session and it's getting stale, or they don't know how to do it, or, they need somebody to help facilitate it or whatever it might be, bring a large language model in there, have something going that's transcribing all the spoken word into text, feed that into a model and maybe, set a timer or something and have people periodically say, okay, large language model, take us in a new direction. Yes, and this, give us some more ideas, combine some ideas, whatever you think is best. And you can absolutely do that. So look, if we had these tools back when I was doing this, back in the olden days of like 2019, man, I couldn't imagine like how much more effective like these sessions would have been in coming up with ideas.
Yeah. Maybe one point for some people that may not know. So you mentioned Fireflies and Otter AI, and then there's also Fathom, and these are AI transcribers and note takers that can. I don't know if it's real time for all of them. I have Fireflies, but they certainly send you a script at the very end of like the whole meeting. Like right now, if I were to have Fireflies on here, it would be able to transcribe absolutely everything that we're talking about, and then send me a summary of the conversation and notes on it, which is pretty.
If anybody's weird and has an Android device like me, like I on the Pixel, it has a recorder on there, and that actually does do live transcription.
It does do live, yeah.
And that is actually really good. Supposedly, I think Apple in the next release is going to be getting this at some time. I believe
they're all gonna get.
Yeah,
them.
it will be there soon enough. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. One point on here that I've had a couple guests that are a little bit more naysayery about the AI tech boom. Like I'm of two minds. I think it's absolutely fascinating, but I've talked to enough people that are hesitant about this. If we're going to focus on this brainstorming example here, because I think it's quite interesting, do you think that there are going to be, well, of course you think that there are going to be some negatives, but maybe what would be some negatives from your perspective? Like I can see maybe people relying on AI too much. It's like, well, why do I have to think about anything if the AI is going to give better answers than me, and I'll just kind of sit back and eat my little, McDonald's breakfast muffin or something like that. Are there any other thoughts that you have on this? Because I like to give a balanced perspective and not just push how fantastic AI is all day long, which I think it is. But
no, look, I'm 100% aligned there. I think there are. Look, with any new technology, there's going to be tons of downsides. Like, I think mobile phones are wonderful. I could tell you, like, I could probably sit here all day and list out the downsides of these devices, and I think it's becoming clearer and clearer to us what they are. Is it a net positive still? I think so. And I think AI will be a net positive as well. But there will be jobs lost because of this. I think we're already seeing that. That is 100% the case. One of the things that I very much worry about is the concept of falling asleep at the wheel. And so what that is, if you think about like airport security, think about like the dog that's like sniffing for bombs or drugs or whatever in the baggage part of the airport. That dog is looking for stuff, and you know what? If that dog doesn't find anything, and that dog is eventually just going to kind of like give up. It's going to move on from it or whatever. But one of the things they do is they actually give the dog their little blankie or a little whatever that has that scent on it at the end, and that's kind of reinforcing it as part of the process. If you are working at, CNET or Sports Illustrated, and I bring those up because I think this is exactly what happened at those publications, they were publishing a whole bunch of AI articles. And I think those AI articles were, I bet you 99% of them look probably pretty darn good.
Is it?
You had probably some editor who was looking at these things saying, wow, these all look good. These look good. These look good. And eventually, I'm going to let these things through. I'm going to approve all these because I'm going to go home early, and God forbid I can't look at any more of these things. And what happened? Well, some of those were trash. And, I think both of those companies kind of got smacked pretty hard for this, for having obviously AI published articles. All but guarantee this was just the concept of falling asleep at the wheel, that most of these things look good, but when it's not 100% perfect, that's going to happen. Now, who's really harmed by this? Some writers, editors, things like that. It gets much more serious when you start to put an AI into medical applications, into other places, or whatever it might be. With every I am sure my kids who are 13 and 10 have no idea really how to use a Mac. They don't. I grew up at a time where I literally had a map in my car because I get lost all the time.
Sure.
And I didn't have access to GPS and so forth to be able to do that. So like, that's something that this generation is not going to have. Is that important? Probably not. It's like you have GPS. So like things will be lost because of this. It's, the only question is there going to be more net good on the other side? But to me, falling asleep at the wheel is always one thing that comes up because you will have that problem until AI is 100% perfect, and it probably is never going to be 100% perfect. The more that we rely on these things, the more that, the 1 in 1 million chance of something going wrong is going to happen, and we might not catch it or even know how to fix it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. One other thing that's connected, but maybe on the flip side, like the positive side, that actually comes up on the podcast quite a bit is this idea of democratizing technology and making it more accessible to many people. And I know that this was a point that you wanted to touch on, specifically with like no code AI, or I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole about coders maybe being obsolete. Maybe I've heard fair arguments on both sides, but what are your thoughts on whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Cloud, whichever one of these chatbots is going to be the winner in the next, 5 years or something like that, giving opportunities to say like new entrepreneurs or people who want to, write books or, kind of whatever vertical you want to focus on. It gives opportunity to pretty much everybody that has a Wi-Fi connection, an internet connection, the opportunity to build and create and do things that they may not have been able to do before, or at least hastens or facilitates that process. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Mark. I think I always like to look at historical analogies, and to me, I think about photography and things like that. And back 150 some odd years ago, like, you had Matthew Brady and like 5 people could take photographs and so forth. And now we're walking around, we're literally, just about every adult human on earth has a place in their pockets where they can take photographs that are amazing quality. People don't have to stay there forever. All these other things that you had to deal with way back in the day. Does that diminish like what it means to be a professional photographer? I bet you somewhat it probably does, but I think also there are plenty, wedding photographers and all that, or sports photographers like that is that persists. There are still those jobs out there, the people who really know how to use that craft. And, wedding photographers, they don't use film anymore. They're using digital. They're using these technologies, but they're just using it, they're using the lighting, they're using all this other stuff to another level beyond what we all have. So I think as, just kind of taking that analogy and going forward, if you're looking at it from a perspective of a software engineer, whatever you might have, I think it will change what their job is. Again, if you're using film-based photography and if you defined yourself in, 2002, like I only do film, that's all I do, and you didn't get on the digital train at some point in the last 20 plus years, it's probably a lot harder for you to do your job. I think for coders who are not using copilots or whatever similar thing, I think it's going to be a lot harder for you to do your job because you're going to be at a disadvantage versus everyone else out there. But I think a coder is going to be able to do so much more now. And I think that is the thing that really is promising. I can't write any code, but one of the things that I've been doing lately using Claude Sonnet was I will take an article I write. And so I've been writing a lot about AI movies like 2001, Her, Blade Runner, things like that. And what I will then do is I will make a video game out of the movie. And it's been a super fun experience to do that. So having Claude do the code, it's not perfect. And look, this isn't something, I'm not going to charge like, $20 for a download of this game. One, I don't have the rights to it, obviously. But two, it's something that, you might play for about 2 minutes and then you're going to be done with it. But like, that's okay. And to me, like, it's so fulfilling to do something like that, to be able to at least be creative and say like, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? And to actually work with the AI and building that out. And that's something that really excites me. I hope that every family has somebody who is a videographer who is making, Ken Burns-like documentaries about the history of their family using AI and all this kind of stuff. And it's something that's, only the 100 people in your family are ever going to see and no one else ever is. But like, you couldn't do that unless you're a Ken Burns, 10, 15 years ago. Like, that's the stuff that really gets me excited, the long tail. And look, I even do get excited about some of the freakier stuff. Like, I do believe in, 2030, Disney Plus is going to have a customized generative version of that, where if I want to see Grogu in the Marvel Universe, it's going to be able to throw it in there and do all this kind of stuff. You will still have movies that people go to a theater to. There will kind of be mass media. There will be like individualized media. And I think people will gravitate to different ones for different reasons. Having this option of that personalized thing doesn't necessarily make this mass media thing anything less.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think from all the conversations I've had and the amount of guests that keep talking about personalized, whether it's medicine or finance or games or, as movies, I've touched on this before as well. It's it's a very different kind of world that we'll be living in. And as you said, 2030, I mean, it's not that far away. No. And again, like, I don't know about the positive and negative ramifications of this. There's going to be both on either side. Like, I can imagine media being so much more fulfilling, right? If you want to see your favorite character in a new universe, or if like there's a TV show that you really like that finished, you can maybe continue it in your own kind of personalized style. But then the amount of media that you'll be consuming is probably going to be vastly more than it is today, because it's going to be personalized, because it's going to be so much more, I don't know if we want to use the term addicting, but it'll be certainly more engaging to you than it is to a mass audience.
Yeah.
But I want to go back. I love this idea. It's a new one for me about this, documentary film of your own family, right? I think that's going to change culture, much as you said, the cell phones have changed the, ability of sharing content with your family. Whereas, like, I remember being very young and going to my grandparents and seeing all the pictures of, my great grandparents and my great aunts and people that I've never met. But that's the only connection I have with them now. Whereas maybe in the next couple of years, you'll be able to, take a picture and recreate it. There's some tool out there right now where it reanimates a picture of like an old person in an old type of picture, and you get to see them move and talk a little bit. So it kind of reanimates them in some, maybe unique or creepy way, depending on how you're seeing it. But could you, so that I stop rambling, could you elaborate on this idea a little bit more? Like, have you thought about this idea a little bit more? Is it a bit more fleshed out than it is in my mind?
I mean, no, but I'll do my best here, I guess, as part of that. So, no, Mark, I think, it's putting together a lot of different technologies that we have today that, take voice cloning, for example. You could clone a voice pretty darn decently with, a couple minutes of audio. So if you had, actually, and in fact, I did this. There was a audio clip of Charlie Chaplin, the famous silent movie star. And I remember this was probably about a year ago I did it. And I was like, if I take 60 seconds of that, it was a 60-second clip. Can I train a model on that? And like, it did a pretty darn good job just on that little clip of Chaplin to be able to get Chaplin to say whatever. And of course, like, there is a whole dark side to this, for sure. But if you have that audio of, your grandfather or great-grandfather saying something at some point, like, you could recreate stuff within the family for this. You could make a whole lore and a whole universe of, you and your family in some Lord of the Rings type world or whatever it might be. Sure. And across generations and across time, like that's pretty amazing, the types of things that you can potentially do with this. But yeah, what you can do with taking pictures and effectively animating photos that you have, you could then take pictures and you could, put people into scenes. Maybe it's something where your grandfather is describing, fighting at Normandy or something like that. And do you know what? You could probably put that into Udio and get sound effects and all this other kind of stuff generated as part of that. You could have it in his voice, and then you could probably get some B-roll type footage that would be made just for you with maybe even your grandfather's face of him describing what he's doing at the beach at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And look, it's not going to be real. Movies aren't real. Like, like we get really emotional over, who's going to die in Deadpool versus Wolverine.
Sure.
Like, they ain't real. Like, it's like, that's all fake. Like, none of this stuff is real, but we as humans still make that emotional connection. And I think just because it's AI doesn't mean that we're not going to, if it's done well and if it's done thoughtfully, it doesn't mean that we'll still have that personal, deep connection to that. And that's actually something that really excites me, to be able to, bring generations together or whatever it might be.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. I've heard also, do you watch the All In podcast?
I do.
Yeah. Yes. I've heard those four guys talk about this future scenario where, Hollywood type films are going to be able to be generated by people like you and me that are using all these apps and tools all the time. And just the cornucopia of media that we're going to be able to produce for families or for, the mass population, personalized or otherwise. I think it's, I still haven't fully wrapped my mind around what that means and how the world is actually going to exist. I honestly don't know if anybody can do that, but it's certainly something interesting to think about. And then, how do people take advantage of that in the sense of creating businesses or value for other people, how to monetize that? The first 100 episodes of this podcast was all focused on technological unemployment and how AI and just emerging technology in general is going to be impacting work and labor and employment. And I think it's still very much in my mind, how these things either, create a new generation of entrepreneurs or creates, a whole generation of people that are unemployable because they're not using these technologies. There's all these questions that just keep popping up as, we're talking about the potential future changes that these technologies are bringing about.
The one thing, I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer as much as anyone else. I like to theorize and think about it, but there are so many ways that it can go. I think some of the positives, at least going in that direction, are one is the fact that pretty much anybody can access these models, and you need very little. As long as you have a device and an internet connection, you can get the most powerful models in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about mostly private models there. But on the open source side, which take a little bit more work if you're not a technologically savvy person to be able to download Llama and have the right hardware and do all this kind of thing, although it will be simplified and there's third-party hosting of that and so forth. But you have both of these going in the right direction, and the cost, as you were mentioning earlier, Mark, is the cost is basically this is all moving to zero.
Yeah.
The fact that you can get this level of power with for $20 a month for ChatGPT, it's insane. Or less than $1 a day, you have all of this power behind you, and it's just going to keep getting better and better. The last point I'll make on that is related to the movies. And I'm not the first person to make this comment, but it was 18 months ago where we had the spaghetti eating Will Smith.
Yes.
And then and 12 months after that, we saw Sora. And now with Runway and some of the others that are coming out there, they're almost to that level that we saw in those Sora demo videos, and people actually play with them. This is, just kind of keep connecting the lines on that curve on where we're going with that. This is going to happen. But you're right. We need to, as a society, frankly, get more people using these tools now, get them familiar, get them comfortable with it, not just the tech guys in Silicon Valley where I live. Just get the people in Dubuque and to all these other places familiar and using these and using them for their small businesses and using them at their schools or wherever else, because it is something that will help level the playing field. That is something, if we use properly, we can get there.
Yeah. One of the things that I say to new clients is think about your capacity as an employee. If you didn't know how to Google something, or if you didn't know how to use your cell phone, or just a personal computer, you wouldn't be employable, right? Like it's not that you would be unemployed, but that no business would be able to employ you because you just wouldn't have the required skills and knowledge to work in the modern day world. And I think it's going to be the same faster than what we think with AI tools. If you're not familiar with these things, I mean, there might not be a place at your organization anymore, as scary as it is. Yeah.
And I will say it's the, what's it called? The illusion of history, I think, is in some ways what you're referring to there. So, there's a study where if you ask people today, let's just say Taylor Swift is the most popular artist in the United States today. Mm-hmm. Ask people how much they would pay to go to a Taylor Swift concert in 10 years. They're going to say, a whole bunch of money, because they assume that who they are today is going to be the same person 10 years. Go back to 2014, and I did write about this. That's how it's still in my brain. Pharrell Williams was the most powerful, or at least had the top song in the world in 2014. I'm sure if you ask people what they would see to Pharrell Williams, today, it's not nearly as much as they pay to see Taylor Swift. Mm-hmm. But like people, you realize you were a different person 10 years ago. You don't realize you're going to be a different person 10 years from now. And what's true for you personally is also true in your job. Because you're right. Like, we don't even think about, like, before this, 20 some years ago, we were still using fax machines, and we were, and people weren't on email, and nobody had Macs, and there were these old, like, garbage Windows XP machines and all this other kind of, like, we forget about all that because we've just lived through this progression. We don't actually realize who that person was back there. And we just think that, well, how I do my work today is going to persist, is going to be the same. And that's not how it happened in the past for you. And even though you think it'll be that way in the future, it's not how it progresses in the future. You whether you like it or not, frankly, you're going to have to start using these tools. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I think that's just the reality. I remember back in the day when my dad was telling me, like in 1999, he's like, why the heck am I ever going to use email? Like, what's the point of this? Like I remember having this conversation because I'm like just graduating from college. I went to University of Illinois, so it was very much at the forefront of like where internet was at that time. And I'm like, Dad, this is the most amazing thing. He's like, I'm never going to use it. And what was he doing by 2004? He couldn't get off of it. Right. But I mean, this is going to be the same thing repeating itself.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I see our time's winding down here. I have maybe two questions more here. One is a little bit selfish. So I personally have one family member that's working in kind of fraud departments, focusing on fraud. And as you worked at PayPal, now maybe you weren't directly connected or working with people that were dealing with fraud, but I'm sure that was a topic that was coming up pretty often at PayPal. How do you think AI is changing the world of fraud detection? I'm like loosely connected to this. I still think that there's a lot of human labor that needs to go into it, and there's less desire or willingness or openness to using AI. But I think that's going to change, as we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes or so. Could you just drop a couple of responses, and I'll pass this on to my family member and anybody who's listening, because I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's very interesting. So slight discussion, not at PayPal anymore. I haven't been there for a couple of years, but love the people, have so many friends there, love the company still. Mm-hmm. Look, at a company like PayPal that's doing, over $1 trillion in transaction volume any year, fraud detection, and frankly, just knowing that the person sending the money is who they claim to be and the person receiving the money is who they claim to be, that's pretty much it. If you could figure that out, that is pretty much everything. But that's where fraud comes in and all that. So PayPal was a company that could have been bankrupted so many times because of this. There's a book by Jimmy Soni, who I actually interviewed back when I was at PayPal, called The Founders. And he talked to Elon and David Sachs and, all these guys, Max Levchin, and, got the story. And like, fraud was at the core of just like the company's survival and being one step ahead of the bad guys. And that is something that we always had to do as a company. a lot of that meant, even in like, the late 2000s, early 2010s, there was a fair amount being done with machine learning and AI tools even at that time. And, by the time I left the company, there was a lot. So what I would say, like in a company like PayPal, there is going to be more help and assistance that's done within using AI tools and so forth. But I think the magnitude is going to be less than most other parts, even of the same company.
Okay.
Because look, most of the machine learning engineers were probably on the fraud and risk team at PayPal. Like, so they already had that. And that it's not just true for PayPal. I'm sure for Visa or Square or whoever, Stripe out there, it probably would have been a very similar story. Now what's happening is like these tools can be used anywhere, and you don't need to have a whole team of machine learning engineers to do that. So are they going to see marginal gains? Absolutely. But the magnitude of those gains won't be as much as the team that didn't have anything before and now all of a sudden can, analyze all their customer data in a matter of seconds when it would have taken them like, hours of SQL queries to be able to do the same thing.
Okay, fair enough. Good to know. I guess the final question here, and this is kind of what I end the podcast on. We've touched on a little bit here and there, but it's about the future, right? I don't know if we want to say 5 to 10 years because that's really far out now. Since the generative AI hype wave has been, making things move so quickly. What is your vision or perspective of maybe, let's say, 3 to 5 years for, I don't know if we want to say the world or fintech or creativity. We've bounced around a number of different verticals here today, but maybe just give us your thoughts on like what the world holds with AI impacting it over the next 3 to 5 years, and you can pick whichever vertical you prefer to touch on.
Oh my gosh. No, it's an awesome question. It's so difficult because I think even if the technology progresses and it just keeps kind of going up and to the right and we see these massive gains in these models, and even more than the gains in the models is just our understanding of how to use the models more effectively keeps going. Like there's so much more like for us to do. Inertia is tough though. Like, so for big companies, or for people who have always done things a certain way, it takes time to change that. Just because somebody believes that something could be done better or more quickly or more effectively doesn't necessarily mean it will be. We do things as humans that it's not all about productivity. It's not all about like all these things. Like we're very complicated, very, in many ways, inefficient beings. And that's one of the things that makes us awesome and interesting as a species. So even if the models, I do think that GPT-5 and 6 are going to be absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Outside of, reaching like true AGI where a artificial intelligence is going to be able to do every job in the company more effectively than anyone else. I don't think I think that's some ways away to do that to that magnitude that I'm describing right there. I'm not going to give you a date, but I'd say it's a little bit further out than probably what you're thinking. I think in some ways, like, I think certain fields will probably embrace it more. Like the one that I hope embraces it is actually the world of medicine and the medical field. Because I think the amount of doctors have a really tough job. I don't know in the US, like the average number of patients a doctor has, but like it's probably well north of 100. And, if for them to be reading all the latest literature, there are literally thousands of papers and journal articles that are coming out, probably on a monthly basis, to be able to understand the history and deeply of everyone that they have, like it's impossible for any human being to do that. But to actually, for them to have a co-pilot, like that to me is something that can be transformative. And I really, really hope we embrace that. Because I think it is going to help with health outcomes so much for people to be able to just have a doctor who, is going to be able to look you in the eye, who isn't going to have to worry about, oh God, I got to literally spend my lunch typing notes for all these things and doing that, and just having the AI do it, or have the AI in the ear saying, hey, this, and this, or you said this, well, maybe we could do this, and just having that back and forth, like, God, like that's the one area that I guess I'm most optimistic about, and I guess at least hopeful for. And whether it breaks that way, I don't know. But if we could get the head of all doctors, like the chief doctor of the U.S., to just sign this off and write a pen and just AI everywhere, I think, obviously within reason, we'd be in a wonderful place. But man, I think there is just so much potential there, because in so many ways we got a pretty broken system in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Canada personally, and it can take months and months and months before you even see a doctor out here. So if it helps, even just with diagnosing issues, and then say, hey, offer these 3 potential remedies. I completely agree with you. I think that there's tremendous benefits to be seen in the healthcare field, not to mention all the other ones that we don't have time for to talk.
Yeah, exactly. And the last thing I'll say on that too is, like, hallucinations will happen. You need to do whatever you can to minimize those, because like these are people's lives. Doctors make lots of mistakes.
Yeah,
they are human. They just do that. I don't know if you've ever read the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, but like that's a great book that just kind of talks about the process and improving the process. And like, my gosh, but like, it's a really hard job. We expect them to be perfect. They're not. They're human beings. But to have an AI supplement that, like, could just be so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with you, and I think it's a positive note to end the discussion today on. So thanks a lot, Mike, for coming on. Really appreciate it. I'll have your LinkedIn up in the show notes. Is there anywhere else that you want people to reach out or follow what you're up to, or read your books, or?
I don't read the books. They're awful. They're AI books and all that. But do read the AI stuff I write on LinkedIn. That is actual Mike, not just AI Mike writing those.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, follow me on LinkedIn. I try and post a lot there. I will always comment. If you send a note to me or whatever it might be, that's probably the best place.
Perfect. Nice and simple. Great, Mike. Well, thanks a lot for coming on today. Really interesting discussion. Just appreciate your time, and looking forward to seeing and hearing what you're up to, I guess, in a year or something like that. It'll be good to touch base.
I'd love to come back. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this, Mark.
Terrific. Thanks.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.